Hey everyone, BonzEyes here, back with another hidden gem review, and in this one, I'm going to be talking about a show called Pluribus. So, for those of you who don't know what my hidden gem reviews are, this is basically a non-spoiler review, emphasis on the non-spoiler. And so I'm going to be dancing around the premise of the show very heavily without actually spoiling anything, just to try to give you guys an idea or a vibe of whether or not you should check out this show. So if you're here for a spoiler review, unfortunately that's not the one for you, but if you are looking for a spoiler-free review, then yeah, this is probably going to be very perfect for you. So in today's video, I'll be talking about Pluribus, right? This came out in November 7th, I guess, of 2025, and it's done by Vince Gilligan. Vince Gilligan is responsible for Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. If you don't know those shows, you can see the ratings up here. They're pretty high. Vince Gilligan is a very prolific showrunner, and so I'm very excited to see where he takes this particular show because, for once, it's in a genre that I personally like, and I know him to be a very good showrunner who ends his shows very well. Looking at you, Lost. And so that's why I feel like very safe about seeing a mystery sci-fi thriller like this carried on to its proper conclusion. So what's the genre for this? Well, I kind of already mentioned it there. It comes under the big umbrella of sci-fi, but it's kind of one of those sci-fi shows that pretty much anybody can watch, right? Think more along the lines of Twilight Zone and Black Mirror, right? These are sci-fi shows, but pretty much anybody can watch these shows because it's less about the science and the sci-fi element and more about the social engineering of it or the culture or the way the mystery impacts the plot and impacts the characters, and you're watching them try to figure it out and solve it out. And so it's like a human story but with some interesting weird thing that changes the way the world works or something like that, and so people have to struggle to try to solve this problem. So it's like a crisis management type show. And so yeah, pretty much anybody can watch this show regardless of the fact that it comes under sci-fi, right? So what's the general premise about? Well, again, this is a non-spoiler review, so I'm not going to tell you what that is, but you'll probably work it out pretty early on within the first scene of the movie because it's kind of happens right away. And so you almost pretty much immediately realize, oh, okay, so this is that kind of show. But then here's the thing. There's so many, like think of this, the big bad of the show is like sort of like a monster that you've seen before, right? You've encountered this monster very before and it's very familiar to you, but Vince Gilligan has changed so much about how this particular version of that monster works. It's not a monster show per se, but so much of it has been changed fundamentally that you really find yourself like sort of taken aback. Like, oh, that's not how this usually goes. That's not what usually happens in shows like this. That's not how, you know, they usually act. And okay, though that changes how I would normally act in a situation like this, because normally I would tell the protagonist, hey, do this, do that, because we've seen something like this before. But it doesn't work that way this time around. So now you have to sort of readjust your strategies of how you as a viewer think the main character should act. And it makes it even more interesting now to watch the show because you're watching them deal with something that's in a familiar premise but has very different rules of how the things function, right? And so you have to like create a completely different strategy now to try to deal with this new paradigm shift. And so yeah, it's a very, very interesting new version of something that's quite familiar, and it makes the show a lot more interesting, even for someone like me who's sort of a veteran of this particular genre, to sort of like find something new that I've never seen before, and now I have to theorize a new way to sort of beat this thing. And so on a meta level, though, that also makes this a very interesting show for like table discussions, right? You're sitting across with some friends and you're like, hey, did you watch Pluribus? What do you think about what happened in it? How would you feel if you were in that show, right? And you can sort of have it two ways, right? You can have like the fun discussions where you're just like, oh well, if I was in this scenario, I would do this crazy thing, that crazy thing, and so on and so on. So you can have like fun discussions about it, but then you can also try to discuss on a deeper level what's going on and try to pick themes here and there and try to find and have much more dense conversations about the show and some of the themes and so on. But then again, like I said, it also has that fun element to it too, of like, oh, what would you do if you were in this situation? You had that type of influence or things that are happening and so on. Like I said, it's a very, very interesting premise that could be discussed in many different ways. And so that's another meta reason why I think people should watch it, not just for the show itself, but for the discussions you could have around it. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about the characters and so on, but I will sort of talk a bit about it. So you have our main character, Carol. Now, she is not someone that I personally would want to be friends with, but it's very good to have a character like her that sort of pushes buttons and is very headstrong in a situation like this, because they're going to do the things that need to happen in order to sort of break the system, break the mold a bit, so that you can sort of learn where the weak points are and try to solve the situation, right? Um, Carol is, she's not the smartest person. Well, no, she's quite smart. She's definitely smarter than the average person, but she's no like scientist or anything like that. So you're not gonna find yourself lost following along this really smart character who's thinking things that you can't think of. She sort of has like a decent average intelligence, and sort of like it was nice to see someone like her do try to find scientific ways to solve the problem and actually try things. But again, she's not a science person, right? So again, she is like a headstrong person, and she is willing to get that far. And so I think she's a very good protagonist to have, because you learn a lot by following her along. Even if, like me, you probably wouldn't want to be friends with her in real life. But yeah, uh, main character gets a big plus from me. So yeah, I think I'm ready to give my final review and so on. I think as far as the other elements of the show are concerned, cinematography and so on, I'm not a film guy or whatever, so I can't say much about that. But it was solid. I could see everything that was happening, and the scenes were all shot well and everything for my normie eyes. And music-wise, it didn't have a theme song that stuck out in particular to me. That's not necessarily a minus for me, but it's not like something that you get a plus on either. So yeah, it's kind of meh on the music-wise. As for my final rating of the show, so I'm gonna actually end up giving this show 8.9. Very close to a 9, but not quite a 9. And that's because I feel like there's certain elements from the show that could elevate it to a full-on 9 and put it up there. I do think that this is a show that would, if Vince Gilligan handles it as well as I hope he does, it would definitely cross that 9 and go higher for me. But I don't want to give it that 9 yet, because it's still just like the first season, and I think all of the elements that need to be there were done so well, and they've brought it up to such a high degree. I rarely ever I don't think I've ever given a 9 on my channel, and so this might be the first time. I think this might be the highest rated show I've ever done, maybe even higher than Severance, to be honest, which I think I rated very highly too. But yeah, this show is really, really good, and I think if he sticks the landing, this is a show that would cross over into the 9s for me personally. But at this time, I don't want to oversell it, so I'm just going to leave it at an 8.9 for now. Yeah. So with that, I hope that gives you guys a fair idea of what Pluribus is about. And if you're interested, go ahead and check it out. If you have watched it, feel free to leave your comments down below, but don't give any spoilers for anybody, right? If you like this video, don't forget to like the video, and please subscribe if you want to support me and stay in touch with my channel. With that, this is BonzEyes signing out. Catch you all later.